Hello, guys. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time. I wanted to do this to kind of document what you guys have been doing and the way you've been using the Missions.dev platform, also known as Hugmyndathorp, and see what I can learn from that, if anything. Just starting with, can you tell me sort of where you are and what you're doing there?
Yeah, right now we are in the northernmost municipality of Norway, Nordkapp kommune. And we've been asked to do a project here for our master thesis. So currently we are working on using your platform and some innovation techniques to develop tourism experiences.
Cool. So can you start a bit about telling us about Nordkapp and what kind of place is it and how come you ended up doing a project there?
I think we ended up here because our university has something they call tverrfaglig masterklasse, so cross-disciplinary master class, which is something I do each year where they select one region or specific place and send different kinds of students out there to complete their thesis. And this year it was Nordkapp, and that's how we got introduced to it. We were here in October last year to just see how to play, see if there was something interesting to write about there. And we found that there is like this certain elements of this community here wants to like innovate in the tourism. It's a very cruise heavy tourist destination, and with the current challenges because of the pandemic and future trends leading more towards greener and more sustainable forms of tourism, there is certain desires to move over to more like more sustainable, more individual focused tourism activities.
And I think we were super lucky to be able to participate in this project because all our classmates are sitting home at their home office doing all their interviews over Skype, and we are here in a region of the world where there's practically no COVID cases. So we feel pretty lucky to be able to come here and experience something new.
Okay. So you mentioned that there was some need to sort of innovate or some challenges that the region or the municipality wanted to tackle. So how did you approach this problem, in the beginning? Like, what was your take on how to do that?
Well, we looked at they have a plan or a strategic plan for the tourism industry here, and we had a look at it. We looked at the data, and we saw how that while cruise tourism was kind of like rising every year, more and more cruise tourists, there were fewer of the individual tourists. And I think working towards someone who comes on a cruise and working towards getting people to travel here on their own, it has that's two different things. So we use innovation methodology called design thinking, which is very human centered, all about understanding the user and solving problems and creating products for them. So that's kind of what we saw, and we felt that methodology would work very well in this aspect.
And it's also understanding what kind of scope if we won't have any impact, we can't there are structural changes here that a master thesis won't change. So the scope of what we actually can do, I think, is like make sure there are better experiences here. So when they start to be like, yeah, we should focus more on individual tourists, when they do get their strategies and initiatives off the ground, on that part, they have good experiences that people want to experience, instead of just have something to sell before you start trying to sell it. It's basically what I'm saying.
So would you say that your project got centered around creating good experiences for individual tourists? Is that sort of the main focus?
Yeah.
And the way we look at it, you can spend as much money as you want on marketing your destination or making it visible. But if you don't have the experiences and the products that people want, then it's no use, right? So that's where you got to start. That's where you got to do your research, product development, in our opinion, as innovation students. If you ask someone else, maybe they would have a different answer, but that's the way we like to look at things, and that's what we wanted to do.
Okay, so you had, I don't know if you guys had been to Nordkapp, but you aren't really from there, so you are innovation students and you know some things about sort of innovation and tourism also. I know that some of you have a background in that. But how did you approach working with an area that you don't have inside knowledge into? So how did you kind of arrive at this conclusion? What was your first steps in this process when you had, okay, we're working with Nordkapp, we know there are some challenges with tourism, how do we start?
Trying and failing.
Yeah.
Basically, we tried this out and we talked to some people, started kind of the process before we even got here, and we got some feedback, learned what we shouldn't do and what we should do, and then kind of like when you're working with innovation, you should never really be afraid to fail, and the most important things that you learn actually comes from failing. So I think we didn't really think it through that much. I think that's kind of like as we are kind of naive in a way, that we just kind of just go for it, and then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we learn what we can from that and kind of like change and facilitate the process. So, for example, we try to get people to start using the Hugmyndatorp platform even before we met them, and in an industry that's where most people are laid off and they have no income and they have a lot of stuff to do and to fix, and it's kind of that we kind of learned that the hard way, that kind of wasn't as feasible as we thought, but we had to kind of change it up a little bit and meet them physically and facilitate them in a much bigger aspect than what we thought.
Okay, so could you be a little bit more concrete in like what approach did you start with, and how did that sort of not work out, or what were the limits of that, and then what did you do next? So in a kind of a little bit more of a methods way, so that we can learn a little bit from what worked and what didn't.
We started out with the plan that span over 4 weeks with the workshop every Monday or so, and plans to have people work on their own in the time between with the platform. But I think the plan could have worked, but maybe on a different audience, because we had our introduction meetings, started to tell people about the process, and we felt a lot of resistance. Like people were unsure about why were we doing this, how are we supposed to do this, and also there was a lot of anxieties about the current situation with COVID, and people are out of jobs and such. So we found that we had to get more personal with them. We had to travel around when we got up here, talk to them, reassure them that this is gonna at least be fun, if not valuable, and get them on board. So we had to reduce the time span. So we, instead of having over 4 weeks a larger process, we struck it down to two days right after each other, and made it more intensive.
Mm-hmm. So if I understand, then so basically you had this idea, the framework for engaging with local companies and stakeholders, but you found that it was actually quite difficult to do that, because you kind of needed to invest yourselves into the relationship first. Okay. Yeah, so
Yeah, it's two things, and number one is relations. Like you said, we didn't know anyone here, and that's super important when you kind of get to know people on a personal level before you kind of ask them to join things like this. And number two is we kind of had this idea that people didn't have so much to do because of COVID, and the tourism industry it was as such a low point, and that they were ready to innovate. And maybe that's where we went a little bit wrong in the beginning. And I think people really want to innovate, but it's such a it's very hard for people to kind of like just go straight into that mindset. You have to kind of facilitate them into it and make them guide them into it, if you will.
So did you find a way to guide them into it?
We did. So what we like we said, we were working on design thinking, which is where you basically collect insights about people that you are going to work towards. So we chose four segments, and we started interviewing people. Like our original plan was to get the people to do this themselves, to kind of like call around, find these insights, talk to people, and there was kind of some resistance towards that. So we changed that to doing that ourselves, finding insights about four target demographics that we thought were interesting. But then after we did that, it took us maybe 1 to 2 weeks to we performed around 40 interviews with different people, potential tourists for Nordkapp, and then we gathered them for the workshops where we kind of explained them what we had found out, and then we gave them the task to kind of find some problem definitions. So that's something super important in innovation. We think that you need to find a very clear and defined problem definition before you can kind of start to come up with ideas. So yeah, and that's the phases kind of followed after that. We had an ideation. Yeah. So I think I'm not sure how many ideas it was in the end, but I'm sure it was close to 100 different ideas, because then it was much easier for the participants to kind of be like, okay, this is the problem that we have to solve. And then it was like we gave them 1 minute each to come up with ideas. And I think almost everyone had like 5 different ideas on how to solve every problem. So it was really cool to see. But kind of like we it's easy to forget that we've spent the last like 1.5 2 years learning all these techniques and this kind of mindsets, innovation mindsets, and that it's not super intuitive for everyone. But if you get a real problem, here's a problem, solve it, then it's much easier to come up with ideas. We can't find that problem without having insights towards whoever problem you are trying to solve, or to the persons. You need to solve a problem for a specific person, if that makes sense.
So is it maybe correct to assume that a key thing to getting people into an innovative mindset was to investigate a little bit and find a way to frame the problems in a concrete way for them that was like not in an abstract, but like, yeah.
Let them frame the problem, because then one thing we were kind of like we knew the risks about is because since we did the insights work, then we have a lot of ownership to the insights, but the participants just see points on the platform. So we have to do something to give them ownership of it, and having them like, okay, we see this means that this is a problem. I think when we got them to do that, they got like ownership of it, and it was much more natural for them to come up with ideas because they've kind of felt like they were their own knowledge.
So then I wanna shift the conversation a little bit into the platform as a tool. So in this process, in which ways do you think using a platform like that was helping, and in which ways was it sort of limited? Like, where were the limits of what you could do with that, and where were the things that helped, if anything?
Number one was structure. That's what's helped us the most by using the platform, is to kind of like have somewhere to put all the problems. Have some like just you could use a whiteboard, but it's such a mess compared to using your platform. So that's the best thing about it. And what kind of like is the hindrance with it is that not everyone is like as technologically competent, and kind of like unsure how to approach it. And it's also maybe a little bit easier to write down an idea on a post-it than it is to write on a platform. But I think it's also demographics here. If you have someone who is technologically competent and kind of have that mindset already, I think we would just do this process that we did. We would do it like just on the platform. Would be just as good as anything.
And one thing I heard the participants say was they really like to have, instead of like the whiteboard that gets erased by the end of the day, you have it concrete on the web. So you can go and check it, you can see it expands, you can take it with you. So it's a concrete place where you actually, the work, even if it's not used every day, it's still there somewhere, so you can pick up the ball later.
One of the participants also asked if, in Excel, you can open another page, and like doing that with a clean sheet, so they can start their own project in there and our problem and build on it from a start.
Cool. Unfortunately, the connection is not the greatest, so I didn't get all of that, but hopefully I can listen to it later. One of the things that I'm actively thinking is how to cross this bridge between in-person work and the online space. So, how to like get it from the post-its to the platform in a smooth way. Do you think that that this is something that we should be looking into, like having in-person workshops that then are transformed into the platform in some sort of automized way, or any sort of tips about how to do that from your experience?
Maybe make like a space with the notes where you can just type in words fast instead of making new ideas every time. They can have like a word note on the side that's especially for themselves. They can write down everything as fast as they come up with it.
Because one of like the negatives about using the platform, if you want to come up with a lot of ideas fast, is that there's like multiple steps, right, to putting in an idea to the platform. So, but it's not in every situation that you kind of need to come up with an idea fast. But sometimes if you just give people a minute to come up with solutions for an idea, then that kind of like stimulates and kind of like a positive stress thing where you come up with more ideas because you know that you have a time limit to solve that problem. And you
Yeah. So let's frame the question now like this. If next month you guys were asked to do a similar process in Bodø or some other municipality in Norway, first question would be, do you think you would involve the platform in some way in that process? And if so, how would you go about doing that? How would the workflow be, and how would your sort of ideal, having gone through this experience with Nordkapp, how would you go about doing it again the second time around?
So I think one key difference here is getting asked and asking to hold a workshop. So we were in the position that we would have to recruit people and ask them to join in to develop the method that we are developing. So as much as we were doing them a favor, they were also doing us a little favor. If it was someone who asked us to do this again, which would be super fun, by the way, then we would probably change a little bit of the things that we were doing, kind of setting a little bit higher demands to the participants. And because we could have done this better if we had 100% motivation instead of 80% motivation. 80% motivation is more than good enough. It's not that, but if someone would ask us to hold this workshop somewhere else, we would hope for that 100% motivation and dedication to innovate and that will to innovate. And I think that's, if you have that, then you can get a lot of more things done as well.
Yeah, and one thing, this time we had to manually input like ideas and challenges to the platform. And if we were to do it again, we would probably set up some time at the end of the day, like these are your ideas you want to work with, now put them into the platform. So the workload on us is reduced a bit, and they again get more time to use the platform.
Yeah, maybe facilitated more time to make them understand the platform, how to use it, so they could do it themselves.
Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing is that through this experience, the sort of main principal challenge that you were having was with the engagement with the local community.
Yeah, both yes and no. They were like as much participated. They were participating as much as we could have hoped for, but at the same time, this was something that we brought onto them. It wasn't like they were thinking before we came around, oh, we need to innovate this, we need to innovate this, we need to do this. There was something that we asked them to participate in. But I think if after this, maybe they see that this way of working is a good way of working, then maybe that will stimulate more innovation. And maybe if we come back here at another time and facilitate a similar process, then the results will also be much better. And yeah, because tourism is kind of interesting, because I think a lot of the businesses that work with tourism, it's not like many of the ideas just come from their own head, if that makes sense. Something that, oh, I think this is cool, we should do this, and then that's the product, and probably it never changes that much. But if they kind of adapt that mindset to being more understanding the customer, to having the approach of iteration of your ideas, and kind of like changing it all the time as when you get feedback, that's kind of a good mindset to have. And to be a part of a process like this, you kind of get that mindset a little bit, I think.
So with that being said, with iterations and getting feedback all the time and creating new things, like if I put that hat on right now and I ask you guys, maybe this is sort of the last question, if you were the R&D department of Hugmyndathorp, having used it in the wild, in the concrete thing, what would be the things that you would be specially working towards or looking into or wanting to develop?
Like Markus said, like tabs, so you can have different boards with different ideas. I think would be something that where you can have like one public board and one private, or several private. So you can like organize, you can use the platform to organize all your like innovative initiatives. So you can use it that way, but you can also have like this open innovation style ID bank insights, like the community owned stuff, and you can have your private, so you can work on it. And some way to take notes, or like faster, maybe a function where you can have like bullet time brainstorming, like quick, put it on the board. Something along those lines to just make it faster, but yeah, something along those lines. And generally, yeah, I think that's the two things I would work on.
And also, when you submit projects, it would be cool to have like more features to kind of prototype. And not just a picture and some text. You have a lot of features now, and you can put a video and you can do all this stuff. But maybe if that was something that we thought about, that how can we use this this projects part of the platform to kind of make a really good prototype as well, that you can test it, and maybe have some where when you share it with people, they can easier tell you if they like it or if they don't like it. Maybe you don't have to sign in to comment on prototypes. Maybe something along those lines.
Yeah. So, is it about having some way to draw in it, or define things, or is it more about a way to get feedback from others, or is it about showing different variations and having a voting poll, or can you tell me a little bit? Is there more?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like different measurements that you can make like within the platform. You have this like take part, and you can show that you like this idea, but maybe some more features on. It's hard to tell. It varies a lot from what kind of product that you're designing, but maybe have some more features on getting feedback. Would be cool.
Okay, interesting. Great. Is there anything worth mentioning about this process in Nordkapp, either about the Hugmyndathorp or something else, before we?
But I would say that for anyone that wants to do some kind of innovation process or solve some problem, then I think the Hugmyndathorp is a great way to connect people and have them work together and sharing ideas. And what we see from having a workshop like this is often the best ideas, they come from a problem someone else submitted or because people have different ways of looking at the world, and we come up with great ideas if we talk to each other and share that valuable information.
And I also think the participants saw the platform as a fun point of the whole process, like going into the platform, clicking around on the different ideas, insights also. And it was also a really good way to structure our insights and make them come up with ideas.
Great. So thanks a lot for this chat, but also thanks for the experiment. I certainly learned a lot by looking over your shoulder and sort of seeing where it was taking us. This idea that you guys came with in the beginning of incorporating insights, not just problems and ideas and projects, is something that a lot of other people have kind of picked up on and are interested in using. So already I got what I want from this. So very grateful for that, and for this time that you're taking to kind of share how that went. Yeah, so just that. Thanks for the experiment, and I hope we'll sort of keep bouncing those things, and really happy to hear more stuff if that pops up in your minds later.
It's good to hear it help you, and it was a good help for us as well. So thank you for letting us using it, the platform.
And thanks for letting us be the first guests on your podcast, and that's very safe for us because the first episode of a podcast is always bad.
Yeah, so I have to admit, I didn't hear half of what you said because the connection is so bad. Hopefully the recording is better than the connection. But instead of saying like what, and ruining the podcast, I just like decided to let it go, and then I'll listen to it later and see what you actually said about stuff, So I'm gonna cut it here and see how this goes and listen to the recording. So bye guys, all my best to Nordkapp and Norway, and see you around.
Yeah.
See you.
Ha det bra.
Bye.
Bye bye.